and listening to Bishop Brothers, a safe space where real issues being dealt with by real people are brought forth and discussed. Every week, the fire of love is lit as two 21st century bishops share the first century church message. Join and engage in the conversation, featuring grassroots interviews, book reviews, and God-inspired commentary. Here are your hosts, Aaron and John, Bishop and Bishop, Chief and Chief. But above all, they are brothers. Welcome aboard.
All right, back again.
Back in the saddle.
Yeah, back again.
Back in the saddle.
Well, we got some good stuff tonight.
Yeah, we do. I'm excited for tonight.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, this Texas weather is crazy.
Oh yeah, isn't it?
It's freezing to warm to it's right there today though.
Yeah, no, it was okay today. It was nice to not be in the 20s. That was nice.
Texas.
Yeah. So really interesting topic today, and that there's so much around Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically House of the Dragon. But so not only is there the internal issues, right? Especially with episode 1, there's the external issues. So I know, kind of what you want to talk about tonight is maybe something a little more internal to the show. I thought since this is the first one we're going to do, there's some external issues I think need to be brought up. And the first one I want to actually talk about, and I want to get your take on it. Because we come from different church backgrounds, but I think we've both seen this in our church background. So I'll give you an example. When I was younger and I had younger kids, we watched the Harry Potter series. Right, my kids, my wife, we love Harry Potter. Okay, I think it's a great show. The church I attended when the second or third one came out, I remember discussing how much I liked the movie.
Right.
And I remember a lady telling me that was witchcraft, and that if I was watching that, I was inviting demons into my house. Right now, at the time, I didn't, all these degrees you hear about, Bishop John having, I didn't have none of that, right? I was very ignorant in spiritual things, and I was a new Christian. And that actually scared me, right? In our culture, Irish culture, banshees, leprechauns, like all that is considered real, and we're terrified of spirits, right? And so that that struck a nerve with me internally, and so to me, I was like, no more Harry Potter in the house ever again. Why? Because someone said I didn't get it from the Bible. I didn't get it from. So that's kind of the first thing I want to talk about is before we even dive into Game of Thrones. The question I'm always getting, is that something you should really be watching? And my answer, clearly we both seen it, so I think our answers are clear. My answer is yes, right? I have no issue with a quote unquote Christian watching Game of Thrones. I have no issue with Harry Potter and here I'll tell you why I think, and then I want to hear what you think. I think it's okay because if you need a scripture, I'm not one of these like I need a proof text from the scriptures to tell me what I can and can't do in every facet of my life. But if you feel like you need one of those, right? Scripture tells us to be in this world but not of this world. Now I can tell you this, if a human being wrote Game of Thrones, if a human being produced and filmed Game of Thrones, then, and I think this is one of those places where you're definitely going to find that the image of God is in there. It's in the art. Now there's some things in there that this is not a show I would watch with my kids. This is not a show that I would play, at church, right? Like there are places that this is not appropriate to do. But I do things all the time that aren't appropriate to be done in church. Right? Just because I wouldn't do it in church doesn't mean I shouldn't ever do it, right? So I guess for me, you can be in Game of Thrones but not be of Game of Thrones, right? Like you can be into Game of Thrones and I can find the image of God in those things. And secondly, I enjoy art, and although it's a harsh art, Game of Thrones, I can still find beauty in it. I can still find themes in it. I can still find things that are applicable I can find things that, as we would say, would preach out of Game of Thrones. So I am curious what, your take, and if you've ever run into that with people. I get it all the time. Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Rome. I mean, there was, Westwood. I get it all the time.
That always is context. We do it. We always do it. We got a part of our battlerism, strata context. This is the context. Questioning any, Paul admonishes us, advises us, try to lead us to anything you do, should be done in moderation, proper context, timing. All those involved in it. I mean, you hit it. Would you sit there and watch this with your kids? No. Would you sit there and watch this with? No. But this gonna really mess some of y'all up. The Bible, the 66 books in the Bible, people esteem in some cases higher than divinity to me.
Yeah.
It's some things you don't want your kids reading now.
Right. Would you?
Do you understand? Do we understand that? Because don't tell me to make a comparison, because this is what we're talking. Because the Bible. Do you understand? The Bible is the most complex, the most. It's got enslavement in it. It's got rape in it. It's got torture in it. It's got torture. It's got homosexuality. This is nothing. Stop this this new stuff. So. When you talk about context, you gotta do things in context, and you gotta make sure that the context is right. Look at things like that. Even when it's a show, when I'm looking at things, I'm always trying to get a message of what are you telling me in this situation? What do I need to help people in this? Because as a pastor's heart, you always have a pastor's heart. They don't cut off. So I'm thinking, well, first of all, how can it help me in this situation?
Right.
Somebody else. So this notion that this shouldn't be. And the episode we're going to talk about tonight is particularly what we need to do with, particularly as men. We need to recognize that it's still happening a lot in our society. This is where we're going to talk about. I don't want to get away right now. We're going to really delve into what I want to delve into. And so, watching the Game of Thrones, it is a flat out shame that I'll have to tell some people or hide some people that I watch the show because of their perverted view of some scripture that somebody told them about. And yet, these same people, if you want to get real, sat in there in real life, not a show, but in real life, and watch abuse happening, watch perversion happening right before their eyes with pastors and leaders. So miss me about some make-believe show that was in somebody's mind that I'm watching. They're gonna say cut it. When you don't see it, they're gonna say stop. It's not live. It's live action, but it's not really happening.
Yeah.
They once they off the set, they're gonna go to their cell phone. They're not living in these medieval world, but the world you live in every day.
Right.
Your pastor who's abusing people. You don't say anything. But you're gonna try to come with me about the show. You're doing electric slides. The whole building, you're doing electric slide like you in the club, in the church. That's perversion to me. That's perverting the use of the house of God is supposed to be set aside for the sanctification, for the uplift of the saints. So miss me with perversion, because there's so much perversion that you have in your real life. Yeah. Y'all need to listen so you can see something. But the notion that a show makes me this nuts. That's just this gonna make me like, no. If I'm lustful, I'm lustful. Watching this show is not gonna take less or add to. It's already there. I mean, I can be at work and watch women around the office and be lustful. So am I gonna quit my job? Stop this. Yeah. That's not this. That's gonna make you lustful again. I'm talking about content. I'm talking about grown ups. I'm talking about grown people. I'm not talking about. So don't get out of context. Real context. But me as a grown man, that show doesn't make me more lustful. It makes me more this and that. I take what I need. I take what I need from it and get from it. So, and it's not about justification. If you, again, on the other side, we got to go the other way too. If you don't watch it, I'm not gonna. That's fine. Yeah. See, we gotta go the other way too, because absolutely, no, you can't afford. That's fine. Everything's not for everybody. Right. But don't go. It's so hard for us to find a balance in things. That's what Paul. It's so far. Don't go outside. Well, don't condemn people who don't want to see it. You don't want to see it. That's not your genre. You don't want to see it. That's fine. But that don't mean you can't listen to what somebody else is taking from it to maybe help you grow out of it, grow through something, and better one another. The problem is we can't have conversations with one another because everybody's in their corner.
Right.
They got their stakes down. They got their walls up, and nobody want to listen to anybody. This is why we can't get anywhere in our society.
That's true.
So yeah.
And so so that was the first part, and then the other part, the last part about the externals of this show, is the absolute visceral reaction that I got from some of the fandom about black Targaryens. I was okay. So maybe I'm just naive. In my mind, we're talking about a book that is based on a place that is not real. It does not exist on this planet. Now, there are some themes that have been borrowed from British history, Celtic history, European history, Arabian history, right? Like there have been some borrowed things to make up the experience. But I feel like Allen Iverson, like we're talking about practice. Like we're talking about fantasy things that are not real. Valerians are not real. They exist inside this book. And I was, not surprised, but I guess just really sad that so many people were like, well, that Valerians can't be black. Targaryens can't be black. And I'm like, well, let's just be real. Targaryens can be pink if George R.R. Martin says they are. Or HBO, who buys the rights to this show, if they want to make blue Valerians, guess what? It's their money, right? It's their rights. They can do whatever they want to that show. That's just kind of, I don't know. I don't know. To me, it just kind of opened up where we are as society.
It's history, though. We cultures like to take things and what they're on. I mean, they made Jesus white here. Europeans made.
Yeah, they did.
So this is nothing new. Is we love to own things. We like to define the end. These fandoms, whether Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, they're very serious. And as with anything, there's racists and demagogues and supremacists in fandoms. And this is what they do. So we got to understand that this is nothing new. People like to take over things. They like to own them. They like to make whatever in their minds true to be true. The beauty of art is you wrote books, I wrote books. Scars it's going to mean something to however many people read it. It's going to mean something to them different than when I wrote it. That's okay.
That's all right.
That's the point. It's not for me to control their minds.
Right.
What I wrote, what you wrote, was in your mind. Well, I didn't mean it like that. But if they interpret the way for the good or the bad, if you want to interpret that way, you want to do what you do. But I write it, and my point. Everything's an interpretation.
Yeah.
Everything's an adaptation. People, this will mess a lot of people up. You know that when you read scripture, you're adapting your take from it based on your Western mind, your culture, wherever you're from, how you was raised, tradition. You know it's an adaptation, right? What Paul said and Isaiah said might not mean what they meant, but you adapted in your own mind, and it's okay because God is using it to get what you need for us.
That's correct.
How many y'all bringing it? Y'all love to vote people. Fine, vote. But how many of you know Jesus never voted? So when people ask me, how would Jesus vote? Okay,
he wouldn't.
You understood that the time he lived, talking about the Game of Thrones, do you understand the time that he lived, that he was under oppression, that they had a king, and you can watch the Game of Thrones and you will not see a voting episode on the Game of Thrones because they don't vote and Jesus didn't vote. It wasn't a democracy.
Yep.
But see, you're so shut down. You don't want to hear that, but you will learn some stuff that, Jesus would vote this. No. You take it out of context because he didn't even have that choice.
Right.
In the time which he lived, it wasn't political parties running around. But we, to your point, I'm trying to make a point, we adapt Jesus. Well, he would have voted different because that's what you want to make him.
That's right.
I want to make him black. You want to make him. You would make this. George R. Martin writes the book, and the Bible is written, and we take these authors' words and we adapt to our thing. Yep. And it's fine if we don't fight about it.
Right.
But when we make Jesus a Republican, or Jesus a Democrat, or Jesus a liberal, that's bringing scripture to this, or Jesus what evangelical, or Jesus Pentecostal, we will make Jesus what we want him to be. Then we take him what he is. Because we want to make him.
Right.
He came for us. He's ours. We own him. And so that's what I was laughing because I watched this fandom. I laugh about this because they just want to own him, and it's a visceral reaction. And then what's so bad about this one, different than Tolkien, because Tolkien is dead. Martin's alive, and if he don't have a problem with it, you have a living author that has a problem, but you still got a problem with it,
right?
Because he's been manipulated,
right?
Now he's manipulated. So the point, everything's an adaptation. Everything's adaptation. When I read something in my mind, I'm adapting. We're going to have two different takes on what we've seen.
Right.
It's okay. Because my adaptation is based on my life experience and your life experience. They're gonna be different. They're gonna be different. Why can't we accept that? Why can't we do that and quit making things bigger, more than what they are, instead of saying, okay, this is my perception of it.
Yeah.
Just gonna say, HBO have the. It's like people always want to force. We say freedom and love, but we want to force everybody to think like them. Like, let's go back to the show. If you don't watch Game of Thrones, this is not to make you watch it.
Right.
This is just to get. We watched it.
Right.
We're not afraid. We're not ashamed to watch it. We're not for or against it. It's your choice. But this is what we're hoping tonight to say. Beyond entertainment, we feel like we got some life value out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what I believe you should do with any form, whether it's a book, a show, any form of art you do. You should get some life value out of it because reality resembles art.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are some of the external things. Yeah. When you get around church people and everything's the devil.
Yeah.
I think like we either blame the devil for everything or we act like he's not real. We don't have the balance.
Right.
So, but let's talk about internally. So, for some people who, may not choose not to watch it or whatever. House of the Dragon is a spin-off or a prequel to Game of Thrones. And it has a very interesting beginning, and kind of how it plays out in this very first episode. I think the biggest thing that shocked me was the scene where they save the baby. Right. In essence, they do a C-section in medieval times. Right, which. There's no way mom is going to survive, right? Blood transfusions don't exist. Proper, infection protocols, none of that exists. And so they tell the dad, basically the dad, one of the first things in there is dad has to choose between mom and baby. And I always found it interesting how he chose. Now, I don't know. I've never been in that situation. I don't even know if I could choose. That would be really tough. But he opts for the child, and the way the writing goes, it kind of led me to believe he wasn't doing it out of the kindness of his heart for the child. He was doing it for progeny. He was doing it to maintain power, control, those kinds of things, and at the expense is his wife's life. Right? Now, you could look at it the way I'm looking at it. You could also look at it from, it's likely mom is going to die anyway. So does mom? Do we have mom and baby die? But just I don't know. He was married to this woman for a long time, and it just didn't seem like he was that into he didn't struggle that long before he made a decision. And to me, it kind of spoke to the property aspect of women in marriage, and that is that's a reality in the real world in medieval times, and in a lot of ways, it's still kind of true now. So that internally, that was the first thing that kind of hit me was the birth scene. And by the way, it was very well done because I'm not squeamish with blood, but I had to look away. So it was very well done.
You're telling the kind of nice version of it. See, what I like about one of the interesting people that watch the Game of Thrones, whether you watch the original series or now, this was well done because a lot of times we shy away from the brutality of how human beings can be. Now let's talk about, to give people proper context. We're talking about Game of Thrones. When Martin wrote this book, he said it based on a European. We look at the maps of Westeros, which is a fake. It's set up as basically European. It's a lot different, but it's from a European side. He uses the old War of the Roses as a guide. So it's a medieval society with kings and queens and things like that. So that's what you got to understand. You cannot think watching this show with a democratic mindset will mess you up because it does not work that way. And so when you go through when Rhaenyra first saw her mom, she talked about how she made a comment how for women the battlefield is the birthing bed, and that was a what they call it, a foreshadowing of what was come. She said, your duty, D-U-T-Y. Now you're talking to two sailors here. I want to really we understand when you say duty to us, we truly understand what you're saying. I choose to go to work tomorrow. When I was under that contract with the United States Navy, I had a duty to go to work. Duty is a whole different distinction. It's not like all these choices you have because you have raised your right hand, you signed a contract that you was supporting the defend, obey the order of the president. This is why when we're in the military, we can't say certain things, we can't do certain things because we've taken an oath to do something. When you use that word duty, that's a visceral for me. Anytime I hear the word duty, that's visceral for me because I lived it for 20 years, you lived it for 21, 22 years, so you understand that what duty means. But in medieval world, the duty of the woman was to bear heirs, to produce children. Sort of like the Bible. They remember the story of, again, I tell you can connect the scripture. Remember the story of Hannah. Remember the story when she prayed so. Remember the story of Abraham and Sarah, when she, to the point she cut a deal. Sarah cut a deal with Hagar to have Abraham's child because she wanted so bad to give the one that was promised. The God had promised Abraham through her, but she cut a deal because being barren and not producing heirs for women is not something to take lightly, particularly in this world, in the medieval world. And in those Abraham's world, it was very bad then. Barrenness to a woman was, you're talking about Harry Potter book, that was like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? You think reading books are bad. In those times, barrenness to a woman, so I want to really remember that scene where she understood that, and she said, this is my last one. Remember, she was trying to give him an heir. It was all girls. One died, and she said, "Hey, Viserys, that's the king's name. It's my last time. If this don't work out." So that they did a good job of foreshadowing what was coming. And I want to use a word here that people really have to understand, particularly when we talk about the churches and things like that. We're called agency.
Okay.
Agency is what agency means is that you have fundamentally a control. We understand that, without God we can't take our next heartbeat. So don't get crazy. We understand that, hey, I can take my next breath without God. So that we seen DeMar Hamlin use all his agency.
Right.
First stop, that was it. So we understand it. But this agency I'm talking about is when you and me and the right man, we're sitting in these two seats because we chose to sit here, do this show, We have an agent. We have the choice. Maybe say, "Oh, I don't want to do it." Nobody is forcing us to do it.
Correct.
Nobody is, and that ties back to duty. When duty calls, hey, you got to go to these front lines. Well, you going. Agency and duty really kind of bumps their head because when you walk in a sense of duty, you kind of lose a lot of agency. Like I'm not just picking that point. That's why they really bump their heads. That's why Paul said when Paul says this was twisted a lot that I'm a slave to Jesus Christ. Is he talking about now in an American mind? No, he's talking about child slavery. No, he says he's a slave. That's a form of it's a duty, but it's a vocation of love. But I'm so loyal to him that I would even enslave myself for him.
Right.
And so these words are very critical. Watching this show, I think James said it's really poetic. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, and like you said, there's really good foreshadowing, and there's some other foreshadowing too. Like we kind of get a taste of the depths of the brothers' depravity.
Yeah. Right.
Like we get kind of a foreshadowing I believe in the tournament. Yeah. I don't know if that was was that first episode?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So. Yeah. In that tournament, you get like this kind of sense. Now, those of us who've read the books or like we watched Game of Thrones, like we kind of know what it's foreshadowing. But I really thought it was interesting how
I didn't realize it was going to be this intense. I knew foreshadowing was coming.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. You always wonder. We knew what was going to happen, but you wonder how they're going to show it. And
right. And they showed it.
They got intense with it. So that's the difference. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, for me, because I kind of knew what was going to happen, but I think for a spiritual or at the biblical level, understanding the depravity of man, right? Whether you believe that it's original sin or trust me, I've always told people even without original sin, we do plenty to keep ourselves
original.
to keep ourselves depraved, right? Yeah. So, but I really respected how they showed all the different types of depravity. Like it wasn't just a sexual issue. It wasn't just there was rage, anger, all these pieces that made up his personality. And the psychologist in me is always like, what happened when he was a kid? Like I want another prequel because I want to know what happened that made him so angry. Because if you look at him and you look at Rhaenyra, right? They're very different, extremely different. At least in the beginning, she's very kind, very very loyal to her father, very, almost like she's kind of accepted the game, right? Now later that changes, right? But to me, just the levels of depravity that show up, and just how, because to me the whole thing, the whole episode, the whole series, even Game of Thrones, was all about people will do what they need to maintain power. People will do what they need to maintain control, and it just kind of shows the deep levels that people will go to maintain those things, or to maintain a presence, or just to be within proximity to power, like all these things. And what's interesting to me is like, people I watch with like, man, that's crazy, and I'm like, no, that's real life, right? Like that stuff happens now. It may not happen like that, but believe you me, like I see a lot of these politicians, I see the depths that they will go to. Look at this whole George Santos thing, right? Like to me, that is a direct artistic representation of the depths a person will go to stay in proximity to power.
Let's go to the tournament. Remember DeMar Hamlin, right? The Buffalo player that had a cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
When that happened, for some reason, I don't know why. For some reason, I don't know why I'm not going to say it because I'm not going to say. But for some reason, I was watching the game tonight. I don't normally watch Monday Night Football. I don't care about neither team.
Right.
Me and my wife would just happen to watch again, and he collapsed. And I'm thinking about, do y'all know Paul? That a lot of scripture he wrote was him going to tournaments in the Roman Colosseums, and what was happening is a great debate when he dropped, and Joe Buck came on there and says they mentioned CPR, and I said to him, I said, that's bad. I said, not playing this game, man.
That means he's dying.
Yeah, I said, this game's done. And they was having debates on Twitter about the tournament. You know, the tournaments, hey, you get taken out, you come there, drag you off next. And I'm thinking about on Twitter, I'm watching Twitter rage on fire, and I'm thinking, this is a game. I'm living now the gladiators. I'm living what Paul was saying he went. Paul did a lot of things a lot of scripture because he went to gladiator events, and in Paul's time. See, y'all love Paul so much and stuff, but when you was a gladiator, it was death. Mm-hmm. It wasn't no timeout, halftime. That's right. Call the commissioner and all that. No, it was you. If you're dead, you're gonna get drugged out. That's it. And I'm thinking about these people want to drag this man off because they was talking about fantasy football. What about the playoffs?
That was the one that drove me crazy.
The gambling. I mean, it's our style. But I'm thinking about watching House of Dragon, how they be yelling, and I wouldn't do that. Yes, we would.
Yeah, we would.
We just do it a nicer, kinder job.
Right. We just do it on Twitter.
You would say, get the if he's dead, get his, you know what other thing. I need the next event. I got my best going on. It was rage, and I in my mind, this how I am. I can hear the rage. Like, get him out there, hurry up. We're going to the game, because when they was going back and forth and stuff like that, I'm like, nothing's changed.
Nothing.
They just was out with it. They were just bloodthirsty. Why? Because, feel me on this, they didn't think they were doing anything wrong. Why? Because that was the culture.
Yep.
See, we look at things as wrong now, but in their world, in their point of living,
that was
if you
normal.
die,
you die.
This is death match. This is a blood sport. This ain't no football pass. And if you die, you die. Next man up.
Price of admission.
And we say, shit, the guilt, no. But I'm looking deep on Twitter. Hold on. We don't supposed to be a civilized people. But you should see the tweets. Get him off the field. My fantasy league. This affects the playoffs.
Oh man.
My gambling.
I caught holy hell for posting on TikTok. Mm-hmm. I caught so much heat because I posted some ESPN writer beforehand. He was like, get this guy off the field. We don't stop games for injuries. I got my parlays to worry about, his bets. For those of you who don't know anything about betting, right? It's like I got my parlays to worry about. Like, let's get this show on the road, right? That was at like 8:43. It's like 5 minutes after it happened. Mm-hmm. An hour later, he's like, "I'm sorry if people misunderstood what I said," and so I put them up together, and I was like, everything that's wrong with Christianity in two tweets, right? Mm-hmm. And my thing was, you said what you meant. Mm-hmm. Right? Why can't you just stick with that? Because you caught hell for what you said. Now you want to play I'm sorry that... This is what really made me mad. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm sorry that you misunderstood what I said. No, I didn't misunderstand what you said. What you said was very clear. Yeah. So you missed me with all that.
But no, it goes back to me. That's true. But it goes back further what you said earlier. It goes to our depravity. Mm-hmm. See, we don't think we're depraved. Those people were depraved back then.
Not me.
But we're just like him. We just wear different clothing, different way to do it. But we're just as depraved.
That's right.
We're just depraved. It's his depravity. It's our depravity. That's the key. And so that's what I'm saying. Miss me to the point. I like how you open it because I won't go there. But you said that beautifully. Miss me with your, we don't watch, because some of y'all Christians were the ones on Twitter saying, get him off the field. And Jesus,
maybe you
get
should
him
watch.
off the field. Yeah, so don't hold on. That was real life. Yeah. It wasn't no Joe Buck wasn't gonna say cut next thing. No, that was real life. But y'all won't watch that. and you try to justify that, but you watch a football game and be so depraved that you want to get that human being in a real life situation, drag him off the field. We don't care because I got my fantasy world. That's depravity. This show can teach you a lot about yourself of how we justify our behavior, but what has really changed? It's just the way the method and way we do it. See, I'm not in a stadium and to pray before people. I'm just hiding behind these keys,
right?
Being just as depraved,
right,
as I want to be. Yeah.
Saint Mike Tyson said something that has stuck with me. He said, the problem with this. He said the problem with this generation is that you say things on Twitter and you don't get punched in the mouth for it. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, you get to hide behind the keyboard. You get to hide. And I'm not saying go punch people because of what they say. Mm-hmm. I don't think people should be violently attacked for what they say. But I am going to hold you accountable if you're going to say something that messed up. Mm-hmm. Get this guy off the field because my parlays, my bets. And I actually don't have if that's who you are, that's fine. I'm just going to block you, right? Like, I'm just not interested in listening to you. It's the cover up that irritates me. It's later when people call you out on it because you were expecting everybody to have the same mentality you did. But when people start calling you out, like, wow, man, that's messed up. Now I'm sorry. Now you're going to gaslight me. I'm sorry you misunderstood me. Why are you so mad? No. That whole thing. And I agree with your point. You will sit there and you will jump all over me for calling that out on TikTok. And then you'll tell me that demons are going to come through my screen because I'm watching Game of Thrones. Yeah. But you have no problem watching a real man physically dying on the field. Right. You don't know if he's okay. You don't know if the CPR worked. We weren't down there. He could be very dead. Yes. Right? And your response is what I saw in Game of Thrones. Yeah. Drag him off the field. Yeah. The show must go on. Yeah. So maybe you do need to watch Game of Thrones so you can understand just how medieval your thinking really is.
It really is. Yeah. Full throated. I mean, it was a shame. And now getting to I just think it was brilliant how they did it. So Viserys' wife Emma goes into labor. And it was a brilliant juxtaposition because they were showing remember she said earlier that the battlefield for a woman is the delivery bed. Yeah. And they were showing at the same time this tournament going on. And they were showing at the same time you got the midwives and people in there. She was fighting for her life. Right. And they were showing at the same time the bloodthirstiness of a tournament and how people were trying to kill it. It was just such a great a visual, sensual contrast of how in one area we so bloodthirsty, kill them, there's the next thing this woman's fighting for her life, and then she goes to the point. And here's what really when we talk to women about, I talk to a lot of women about this, was the part that they showed how the power of agency, back to agency. Yeah. Remember, she said her duty was to bring forth, in her particular case, a male heir, because she was the wife of the king. The king needed an heir. This is very important. The king study it. This is not some little thing. They need a male heir. They need an heir to pass on the bloodlines. Right. And so she said, "This is my last time," and how she was fighting for that. And then when he was having a conversation with the doctor, if you want to call him doctor at that time, it was more like
Maester, I think is what they call him. But basically the doctor.
Yeah. She had no part in that conversation. Nope. We have decided to be where we're sitting right now. We have decided the jobs that we've taken. Mm-hmm. She had lost agency. Even somebody, going back to the military, I'm sure how the difference is even we, in our right minds, when we took that oath, we decided to put ourselves in harm's way.
That's right.
So we still had a form of agency. We just now tied to duty.
Right.
There's a different one distinction. But she had a duty, but she had lost her agency because she was the king, and the doctor made the decision what to do with her life. She was taken out of the equation of the decision, and this, if you get past all of that, was very visceral to women to see, because many women still feel right now, even in the church, y'all like this, they have no agency.
That's right.
I know people with titles. I'm going to say it correctly. I know women with titles who will not be recognized for that title in a church run by men, because they have no agency, because they realize that men will not receive them here as Scripture says they should be. Because so they strip off everything they have to fit in. That's a loss of agency.
That's right.
Emma had lost, and so many women do it, and then you got the whole C-section, how in our society how birth is still dangerous, and it showed too viscerally, because there was a great discussion about this, that what we take for granted, childbirth is very dangerous.
Yes.
Even today.
Yes.
And as a man, I want to come on this show tonight and honor women. See, that's why that made me I've had 2 children, but sometimes we get away from things.
Right.
And we need to understand that what we take for granted, it made me think about Hannah. It made me think about Sarah. And that show made me think how dangerous it is. Even though we got 21st century, giving birth is a very different, and we need to recognize that this is the beauty of a show like this, because it make you don't take it for granted, because this how it was done. Even with loss of age, it was still done. It just basically just cut the stomach open, and it just was terrible. But even with all what we have now, it's a very dangerous proposition. But when they was having that conversation and she lost her total agency, where they just started doing something, holding her down based on the decision she had no place in. As you said, they might have to do something at some point, obviously, but she was not given any voice. Bottom line, it was totally his decision.
Right. Exactly.
And that is wrong to the wrong. And I don't know how you can not see that and not be moved by it. And I don't know how you can depict that unless you depict it, because we hide behind all these things we hide behind. But it convicted me so much. Like, am I adversaries?
Right.
Do I take agency from people? Do I take agency from my kids, my blood kids, my kids? Do I give them choice? Am I so want what I want, an heir in his case, or this so bad that I don't even allow people to be? I look at churches. Look at churches manipulate people, takes people agency from them.
Yep.
That is something that we all need to make sure that. And it goes to, I think you talking about pro-choice, brother. I mean, you're somebody not having a choice.
Yeah.
She didn't have a choice.
Right.
She was all subject to the king's decision.
Right.
And she suffered and died, and then the baby ended up suffering and died for it.
Yep.
I mean, really pro-choice? I mean, you're talking about, what about no choice?
Right. Yeah, and we're just talking about a microcosm of the realities of women, both in Westeros, like in this fantasy world,
but it was a world like
also
that,
in the real world, where the way this played out, I could see that being played out in medieval France. I could see that getting played out in the United States in the 1800s. Right? I could even see it getting played out that way in the early 1900s.
Yeah. Right?
That this was still happening. Right? So agency, especially when we're talking about women, and for you Bible folks out there, in Genesis it talks about when God is doling out curses, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things he tells the woman is that you're going to have pain in childbirth, but then he says something else that men like to gloss over this part. He says, well, we like to parade this one out when we're trying to dominate women, right? But he specifically said your desire will be for your husband, and he will dominate you, right? That's not a good thing. No. And I've seen pastors parade that out and say, well, it's because of the fall, women are the weaker sex, they got to be controlled by the men, they'll trope this out. But when I look at it, what I see is that is not the original state of things. That's not how things are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. What God is foreshadowing, in my opinion, is what things are going to be like in a fallen world, right? Mm-hmm. So, yes, women are going to be dominated by men, right? That's not a good thing. Right. That's not to me, if you're using a curse as a proof text to explain why you think you should be in charge of women, your theology is trash, right? And so this is, it's not new. It's not something unique to Westeros. It wasn't like George R.R. Martin got this idea from someone. From real life, yeah. He had to draw on real life experiences to create this scenario. And this is a very real scenario, all the way up into including, I'd say, probably 1950. Oh, yeah.
And he said, if you look at that, they said they had the women there, midwives that had been trained, understood this and what was going on, what was happening. It was a very real thing, and it is a scene that's hard to deal with. But think about it as a woman, I agree with James said. I'm with James because I like what he said. Every single one of us is capable of depravity. See, James, that's it. Yeah. See, for me, that's it. See, I don't want to think. Here's what I want to sit up here and do. I'm just remembering myself. I wouldn't do that. See,
I would never.
Are you sure?
That. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Am I sure?
Right.
See, these are questions we don't like to deal with, and I'm trying to show you the reason why I watched this show. It has what it has. Is because it's known for having messages that are preached, but also that teach you in life. That episode was so visceral for me because I think about it, you've heard it too. I had a C-section. I'm just going. See, I'm thinking 21st. See, I don't think. Okay, good. You had a C-section. It's dangerous. And I'm looking at Viserys. Would I make, if I had somebody's life in my hand, what decision would I make? Yeah. Would I invite them in? Pastors, don't look at me funny because y'all doing it all the time. Mm-hmm. Y'all making decisions, people, and it's depravity because y'all stealing, you're doing everything you do, you're manipulating people. We showed you stop the tapes all the time. That's right. It is, there's things called emotional and spiritual violence. Yes. Viserys had the power because he was king to do physical acts, which was terrible. But I'm taking to the spiritual and emotional violence you inflict is just as depraved, James. Yep. Miss me with I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't take that. But you would do it. You would still wound them spiritually. Right. You do it emotionally. You don't give women agency. They can't come to your church. They can't stand here. They can't do this. And you hide behind your traditions. No, it's depraved because you want to go back to what we said earlier. It all come together. Control things. Right. So this is how I'm adapting the Bible because I want to make Paul's word mean what I want to. Paul didn't want none of y'all to be taught. So I'm going to take that. Forget going to the context and learning. I'm going to adapt it for my benefit.
That's right.
These families were no different than anybody else.
That's right.
We do it in churches. We do it in all forms of life. Yep. We adapt it. Let me make it fit my world. It's easy for us to let down the Viserys. Yep. But we are. There's a Viserys in me.
That's right. Yep.
There's a vulnerable Emma in me. Yeah. When somebody has made choices for my life, like the United States Navy. That's right. Williams G, you going here? I don't like it. Doesn't matter. Duty. Yep. We all been there, but we don't like to say we'll be the prey. We're not the crowd saying get them off the field. We're saying, oh, hold up, no. They didn't do no CPR back then.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and I really like what Miss Rachel said. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just regenerated, more sophisticated ways, and that to me clearly describes the DeMar Hamlin situation by comparison to, now we're talking about a fantasy tournament, but it's based on real tournaments like this happened all the time. Oh, yeah. And the rules that are used in the Westeros tournament are the medieval rules, right? Yeah. Like these were rules that you could get off your horse, and if you felt like you didn't receive satisfaction, you could absolutely draw a real sword and kill each other over it, right? So, yeah, we've just gotten more sophisticated. Now, instead of screaming, get him off the field, we just do it on Twitter, or, we do it on Facebook, or, we give them the best helmets possible. And in reality, so I love that game of, they have state-of-the-art equipment. Yeah, but they have state-of-the-art equipment because people had to take the NFL to court to make those things happen. If you've never seen the movie Concussion, you need to see it, right? Yeah. They knew about these issues for a long time, and they did nothing about it, right? They were forced to do something, right? I'm sorry, you don't get credit for that. You don't get credit when a court order or popular opinion forces you to change your Twitter or to change your outlook or to change your policies. If you knew it was wrong and you did nothing about it, how are you any different from these people in Westeros? You're not.
Right.
But you want to pretend like you're something else.
How are we different from people anywhere when we have a depravity within us? We have the capacity to be depraved. We have the capacity to do, and they talk about this, back to the C-section. This C-sections was very real. It wasn't some art form. That's how they did it. That's how they had to do it back then. And it just, it triggered so much from people, and then I think we missed the opportunity, particularly these Bible, I will never watch something like this, which is your choice if you're doing it for your personal. But if you're doing it because you're trying to be judgmental of something, it shows us who we are. We need to look at ourselves through other people and quit thinking and believing in our goodness. Quit thinking and believing in our. It's easy to say what you do with power when you have no power.
It's fair.
The test come in when you get power.
What do you do with it?
It's easy for me to say what I would do. I don't have no power.
Right.
But power corrupts.
Yeah.
Well, they say absolute power corrupts absolutely.
And that's the theme of Game of Thrones, right? Like the whole reason there is a Game of Thrones is because there are people that say, if I were in the throne, I would do things better. I would do this for you. I would do that for you. I would do this for me. I would rule benevolently. Now, in my opinion, the only benevolent ruler, and we're kind of leaving House of the Dragon, but if you look at Game of Thrones, the only truly benevolent ruler that we get to see, because we don't get to see what Bran does at the end, right? But the only truly benevolent ruler in that whole situation was the second son of Baratheon. Not the crazy one, but the second one that jumped out of the window, right? Like, he had an actual kind heart, and look where it got him, right? And so, to me, that whole line of the game, the musical chairs of who's sitting in the throne, that to me is a signal to the world, like, this is what happens with people. This is what they say they'll do before they get into power. Then they get into power, and look at how depraved they become. Look what power does to them. So there's another lesson that, and that lesson's in the Bible, right? There's a lesson for that in the Bible. And it's actually, that lesson in the Bible, I think, is more horrific and more brutal than Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's easy to sit there and go, oh, you watch Game of Thrones, you're one of those people. Well, you read Song of Solomon. Have you read Song of Solomon? People, I'm telling you, if you haven't read Song of Solomon, it's not something I would use for Sunday school teaching the 5th graders. I promise you that, right? So, you have a double standard. You're just not owning it. And you know what? Do you. Right? Don't watch it if you don't want to watch it. But don't sit there and get judgmental to me for watching it when it's showing me everything that's wrong with the church I can find in Game of Thrones.
Yes. And our society.
In society.
How we treat people, how we do with people. And so I just, that's just the first episode. And I just really, what if a doctor had that conversation with me in my life? You've had kids.
Yeah.
See, we got to understand that, man. This is so powerful, and we got to we have. My final point I'll make tonight is that we don't ever put your position where you take somebody's agency away.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous,
especially as a pastor.
Yes, because
it's easy to do.
Oh yeah,
it's easy to do. Yeah,
because that's come from God.
Yeah,
and that's a. I guess that's why it's hard to see people with Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that. And I know my mother, because that's medical losing your agency.
Right.
The ability to make your own decisions. And that's hard to watch. And it's hard to see. And obviously then somebody does have to make a decision for that person. Obviously we're not talking about that situation. But it's hard. When you imagine somebody losing it, but nothing when you take it.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous game.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, if you let us know in the comments, you don't like Game of Thrones, tell us all about it. You love Game of Thrones, tell us all about it.
Yeah.
Just remember, everybody watched Damar Hamlin.
Yeah.
And the things I saw were not nice things, and they actually mirror what I saw in episode 1 of House of the Dragon.
I've seen a very few thoughts and prayers in.
That's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, my bet is gonna get. I was praying for my bet. I mean, Damar Hamlin. Yeah. He's just a defensive back, right? I mean, we got plenty of those.
I can, in the theater of my mind, I can literally hear those Twitter. I forget the words.
Oh yeah.
I can see behind the words.
Yeah.
I can hear. I'm not gonna say it. I can hear what they were saying.
Mm-hmm. And I love heat of the moment posts.
Oh yeah.
I love when people do heat because it shows me
who
you actually are.
Yes.
Because you do it without thinking, because it's such a part of our lives now that they'll go on social media and say. Now they'll come back with the remix, right? Like, that's not what I meant to say, or I got I got frustrated. No, you meant to say it, right? Like I've said things on TikTok. I've said bad words, right? Like I meant what I said. Mm-hmm. I'm not denying that.
Oh, they go to that was out of character for me.
No, that
yeah. That was no, that was out of character. They said that's not who I am.
No, it's exactly who you are.
Yeah. Just repent.
Exactly.
Repent. Yeah.
Yep. So.
All right. See you next week.
Until next week. Have a great week.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Bishop Brothers. Make sure to visit our page, Bishop Brothers, where you can like and follow so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, please tell a friend about the show. The brothers salute you. Until we meet again, Godspeed.